All right, so today we're going to get started, and I'm calling this exercise Building Rhino Blocks Part 1. And this is the first exercise where you guys are going to have some autonomy in terms of how do you make something. And so it's kind of a two-part exercise. The first part, I'm going to teach you how to bring an AutoCAD drawing into Rhino and then work with that AutoCAD drawing. But the second part, we're going to be making windows or doors today. I'm going to ask that you use the skill set that you've kind of developed over the last 8 classes, 7 classes, to actually build one of these 3D models of a window. We'll ultimately apply materials and that sort of thing as well. And the point here is that I can keep feeding you scripted activities where this is what we're going to build, this is how we're going to build it, step by step, etc. But at some point you have to kind of branch off and decide, how am I going to work with this program by myself? How do I create this thing that I want to create? And this isn't quite completely free, where you're just making something out of the blue. We're going to base it on some existing real-world object, and you're going to try to recreate that. So I will go through how I would make it, but it doesn't mean that it's the right set of steps or in the order that you might do it. This is really designed for you to explore and learn the process on your own, to try to figure out, how do I assemble this information that I've created or that I've learned into a manageable way of creating something new. And so I'm suggesting today that you pick a door or a window, because I think those are generally fairly rectangular and you can get pretty good results out of it using the skill set that you have. Next class on Wednesday, we're going to do organic shapes and pillows and curtains and all kinds of stuff like that. So we'll get out of the rectilinear shapes and I'll show you how to make fancy shapes. But in the meantime, I went ahead and I pulled up some of the big window manufacturers. If you have a specific manufacturer of window you want to work with, that's totally fine with me. It really doesn't matter to me what window you pick. But the point is to try to pick something that exists. Don't just create a window from scratch. Pick one that exists, because we might as well work within the framework. So I pulled up a couple different ones. I'm going to show you how to get to this information on these different websites. Most window manufacturers have information for architects somewhere in them. And so I pulled up a couple different examples. Anderson, Pella, and Milgard are 3 big manufacturers of windows. And they all hide the information in different ways. Anderson's, for whatever reason, is very difficult to find. Milgard is really easy to find. So go figure. So in Anderson, if you want to find information, you have to go into their product support section. And once you get into the product support section, you can click on technical documents. And once you get into viewing technical documents, here we go. There's our architectural tools. Why they make it so hidden, I don't know. But once you download the architectural tool, or once you click on the architectural tools, you can pick any series of windows that Anderson makes. So for example, I could pick the 100 series, and then you can see their different types of windows. So I have a casement or an awning window. I'm going to do a casement window. And if I come over here, we have some different information. They make a Revit file for me to load. That's not going to help us today. They make a 2D elevation file. That will help us today. They make a 2D detail file. Not that relevant for what we're doing. So here under the 2D elevation, I would click on the AutoCAD, the first button, and that's going to download the Anderson Window 100 series casement. If you wanted to do a single hung or a gliding window, you could pick any of these other options too. The gliding door is a sliding door. You could do that if you wanted to. Under Pella Windows, different website, Pella.com, they have a For Professionals section. When you click on the For Professionals, you can say that you're an architect. And it'll take you here. Now, notice that all these websites are interested in selling you stuff, so all the major links are going to be to sell you. You have to keep kind of digging to find more specific information. So here, we want to explore the windows and doors. I'll do an entry door this time because it's different. There we go. And they're going to show me all the different series of entry doors that they have. Let me go here and let's view the details. And there we go. Once I get into the details a little bit is where I should be able to find it. Of course, they're not giving me information. No, I don't care about my opinion. Let's view the size tables and see if they have it here. No. They're giving me all PDFs. Hold on. Maybe it's because I'm indoors. Might have to go back to Windows. All right, let's go traditional. Let's go to casement. Come on. There we go. So in this case, you get to the architect series and they're right there. So why the doors weren't there, but again, I'm not the manufacturer, so I don't know why they didn't have that information. We're looking for the 2D elevation. That would be what you download. In the Pella's case, they have a Revit file and they have a SketchUp file. Again, neither of which really help us at this point. There is a way of converting both a Revit file and a SketchUp file, but it's kind of a topic for another day. We're going to work with just plain AutoCAD 2D files for today anyway. Milgard, like I said, we go to 4 Pros. When you go to that drop down, we can come right here to drawings and 3D models. How easy is that? One drop down and we got that. So it's not buried. And once you get to the drawings and 3D models, it's just a matter of picking what type of window you want, and then you can see the drawings. Same general idea for all of them. So this is not limited to door and window manufacturers. If you have a particular product that you're interested in or you want to use, typically in this day and age, companies provide some kind of a 3D model or at least 2D drawings of that particular thing. So for example, Kohler's is a bathroom product. Modeling a toilet would be rather challenging, though after next class you could model a toilet, but we don't have to because you could go to Kohler, you could go to their toilets, and we could pick a toilet. It would be nice if these websites worked a little bit faster. And once we pick our toilet, if we come down here a little ways, there we go. CAD files. Yeah, I don't want opinions. Here we go. We can get all the way into 3D CAD files. They provide one extra for us, which is great. So these are the AutoCAD versions. They have a 3D Studio file. They have a SketchUp file and an OBJ, which is a generic object file. You can actually download this OBJ directly into Rhino and put a porcelain material on it, and boom, you have a toilet. So it's pretty nice for when you're trying to do a rendering of a bathroom. The point is, you didn't actually have to make it. And so the same thing happens with a lot of the faucets. You go to any of these major manufacturers, they have these kinds of things for you. So learning to go and find the information, it always really helps your final renderings to have good quality products in it. And you don't have to do the work yourself because it's already made. So I like to point that out at this stage of the game. But we're going to go ahead and use one of those AutoCAD files that I downloaded in Rhino. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Rhino. Maybe. And I'm going to choose a large object inches as my template, which is what I always choose. Perfect. So here I am. Nope, looks like I clicked Rhino twice. I only need one open. And I'm going to bring in that AutoCAD file that I downloaded first. So I'll go to File and then Import. So I'm not doing it as a block reference. I'm just bringing it in as a straight import. I'll go to File and then Import. And in this case, it was in my Downloads folder. And there it was in the casement windows. It brings up this DWG DXF import options. Essentially, as we go through it, the default options are fine. Though I prefer to uncheck the unreferenced layers, blocks, and line types because that typically brings in AutoCAD garbage that we don't really need. So I uncheck those. The rest of this is all fine. Our units are correct. We'll go ahead and say OK. And it brings in the various window tables. And so this is a lot of information. I'm going to look in the top view first. And so these are different styles of windows. There's a colonial. Here's, I don't know, I'd have to see. Yeah, different varieties, different configurations. You can see how many different windows are made. They have different, this prairie style has a different set of grids in them. You don't even have to model the grids if you don't want, but I'm just showing you these as options. So what I want you to ultimately do is to pick a window that you'd like to model. And it doesn't really matter which size window you want to model. It's just a matter of you pick one and then move from there. So let's see here. Sure, I'll do a 30-30. It's a square. I'll do that one. So once I've decided on which one I want to make, frequently it's best to just select it, and I'm just going to move it. I typed move, and I'll move it over here. So it's there. The rest of all this information is stuff I don't need. And so I have two options. One, I can just delete it, which it's not going to let me. How nice is that? Or I can go over, oh, maybe it is going to let me. There you go. Or I could go and put it on its own layer and then turn those layers off. Deleting it, I don't need all that extra information. I'll just work with the window itself. I'm going to type move one more time, and I'm going to move this window. Let me turn on my object snap, end, mid, and perpendicular. And I'll move it from this corner to 0, 0, 0. Zoom, Z, enter, followed by S for selected, enter. And now I'm right there at the origin. I can see my window. This is then the window that I'm going to ultimately make. So AutoCAD has a tendency to bring in lots of AutoCAD layers. I'm going to take these objects that I have selected, and I'm going to move them onto one of my own layers. So I'll change object layer. They're now on layer 1. That will let me come in and delete all of these AutoCAD layers. So I'll hold down Shift, delete all of those layers. Oh, looks like it has some block references that I can't get rid of. So let's go into Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. And this is the unfortunate thing about AutoCAD, is it comes in with baggage. So let me select that, and then I'll delete that block. It's not letting me because there's 6 hidden block definitions. Let me turn on those 6 hidden ones. There they all are. Select them all and delete them. One more time. There we go. I have no blocks left. I'll be able to delete those layers. Perfect. The only thing I have is layer 1. Let's call this lines. We can delete. I'm going to keep the default layer, but I'm going to rename that default layer to be window. And we'll continue making sublayers from there. I'll get rid of the rest of these layers, and now it's nice and clean. I have a lines layer, and I have a windows layer. OK, so now I have to think about the process through which I need to make this window. And if you're really not familiar with how windows are made or what they look like or whatever, you could go back to the Anderson website, and you could download or look at what the cross-section of the window looks like. So it was this file here. Though these tend to be far more specific than you really need, because nope, it's still not downloading. Hold on. When it downloads, I'll show it to you. They tend to be very specific with lots of extra nail fins and stuff that you really don't have to model because they're really technical in their. They're promoting a late start class. Furniture design. So I will pass these out for you, OK? OK. So I can download that. It's a little bit more technical information, but if you're struggling with what window dimensions would be or how a window is made or what it looks like, you can download that and get a little bit more information. So I need to go ahead and start thinking about this. Yeah?
How did you get into that part where you edited the blocks?
It was under Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. And there was one here that was listed, and when I tried to delete it, it wouldn't let me. Down here it said show hidden blocks and definitions. That was unchecked, so I wasn't seeing the hidden ones. I needed to turn it on, and then I could delete them. OK, so now I need to start thinking about this. So first off, let's look at it in 3D. It's a set of lines that will work as a guide for me. But right now I have no surfaces on them at all. So I need to start with some surfaces. So I'm going to go ahead and create just a rectangular surface, and I'll use the rectangular plane corner to corner tool to do this. And I'll draw a surface. Let me go ahead and view this in shaded mode. So I have a surface, and I have a bunch of lines. I can use a command called split to take this one surface and split it into multiple pieces, and sometimes that's beneficial. So let's try that. I'll take my surface. Let me have nothing selected. I'll go up to, I never do it from here. I think it's under Edit, Split. There we go. It says Select Objects to Split. There's my surface. It's kind of like a trim, but you're keeping the parts. Select Cutting Objects. I could say, you know what, I'm going to use this curve there and this curve there to start. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And it took that big rectangle and broke it into this, this, and this, which were all beneficial. So let's take this outer frame here, and let's extrude that to make the overall thickness of the window. So I'm going to go ahead and do an extrude curve. Extrude surface. That's available under Surface, Extrude, Solid, Extrude Surface, Straight. I want to make sure that under my options here, I'm saying, yes, it should be solid. And now I'll make this extrusion the thickness of a wall. So in our cases, we're doing approximates. So 6 inches would probably work just fine. So I'll do 6 inches, and I'll hit Enter. So that gives me the inside, or the frame of the window, so to speak. Now inside of that, I have the actual operable part of the window, this part of the window here. So I could extrude this as well. So I could go to Extrude Surface again, same command. This isn't going to be as thick. It's probably only going to be maybe 2 inches thick overall. So I'll do it at 2 inches. But this is also not down at the bottom. It's out. It's usually right on the outside. So let me go ahead and move this. This is a vertical move, so I need to type V, or I could snap from this point to that point to get it out to the outer edge. And maybe I want a little bit of a reveal. Maybe I do move, V for vertical, and maybe I'll go down by negative 0.25 inches. So it's recessed a little bit in the frame. Just a matter of personal preference. Let me go ahead and draw the pane of glass in here. So I can come back, rectangle corner to corner. I can go from that mid over to that spot there. And I've now drawn in the pane of glass. Now to represent glass, though, I need 2 surfaces. So I'm going to offset these surfaces to give myself 2 surfaces, and I'll delete the one that's currently selected. So this is the offset SRF command. So it's under Surface, Offset Surface, or you can type in Offset SRF. And when this happens, you can see that I get a bunch of these little arrows saying which direction is the surface going to offset. So as I come around here, I'm going to make sure that it's set to both sides because I want it to go down and up because I'm giving myself 2. My distance, how far I want it to offset, we'll do it totally at a ½ inch. So each half would be 0.25 inches. There we go. So I have 0.25 inches. Do I want it to be solid? Doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be solid. It's got a frame around it, so I can skip that. The rest of this is all fine. I'll go ahead and press Enter, and I get 2 surfaces out of it. So let me take a quick look at this in Ghosted so we can kind of see what's going on here. So I have the top surface, I have a middle surface, and I have a bottom surface of that glass. We need to take the middle surface and go ahead and get rid of that middle surface. So we now have the glass right there, and ultimately we'll apply the layer to them. Now this particular window had these little grills that were in it. If I wanted those prairie-style grills to be in it, I could do that as well. I could split those. This was that original surface down here at the bottom. I could split it and give myself these little grills. I could also build the grills just using a box tool. So we'll do a box corner to corner, for example, there and there. And maybe the overall thickness is 3/4 of an inch, so 0.75 inches. And there's one of them. I could go through and make the other one on the other side. Oops, looks like I didn't quite get it all the way. So this is a good example of how there can be different ways of making it. So I could make it using the box tool and move it. I could make it using a split tool. I could split the glass pane into multiple pieces and extrude those. There's lots of flexibility with how I build it. And there isn't a right or a wrong way of doing it. It's just a matter of which way seems to make sense to you. And so I could do this again. Go from there to there. And this was at 0.75. And I could go from here to there, and then say this is 0.75. And one more time from there to there, and this is 0.75. So now I have these grills, there, 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 and there. I need to move them up so that they're up toward the top here. We go to move. This is going to be another vertical move, so I'll click on vertical or type V for vertical. And we'll move this up until it touches that top surface. There it is. Notice I have perpendicular snap, so it moves straight up and stops at that point. That's good, but these need to go up just a little bit higher. I made these 3/4 of an inch. I made the glass 1/2 an inch, so they need to go up by 1/8. So I'd move vertical again, and this would be 0.125, so that they stick out just a little bit. And if I looked at it from the underside, I'd have the same little reveal on the underside. Hard to see it. It's there. Let me clean up a little bit. Let me get rid of that surface on the bottom so that we can kind of look in here. There we go. Now we can see it. There's that little 1/8 of an inch on the bottom. Now maybe I made this and I decided, you know what, I really don't like that 1/8 of an inch anymore. I can fix that after the fact. So let me select each of these. Well, I could do them individually to start. Let's say that I wanted this not to be 3/4 of an inch. I wanted it to be 1 inch instead. AutoCAD has the ability, you've probably done this before, where you can stretch an object. You click on it, it gives you those little handles, and you can click on one end and make it bigger, right? Rhino doesn't have that exactly. They have a couple different scale options. So if I go into Transform, I can go to Scale, and then I have 3 different options: Scale 1D, 2D, and 3D. Let me set up an example for you to see this. So I have this box. If I use Scale 3D, or just regular scale, Transform, Scale 3D, and I click on one side, the whole box grows in proportion. If I use a Scale 2D, then it's going to grow in the X and the Y, but not the Z. The height's going to stay the same. If I use a Scale 1D, it's only going to stretch in one direction. So this can be really beneficial on something like these little mullions, because I wanted those to get thicker. So I'll take them all at once. I'm going to scale 1D, and I wanted that to be a total of 1 inch instead. Oops, scale 1D. Apparently I can't type today, sorry. Because I want it to go in both directions, I'm going to start right here at the middle. And that distance there, I want that. You can see how it's getting bigger there. I want that to be 0.5 inches. And now we can see it having grown a little bit in both directions. So it's sticking out on the surface the same distance that it's sticking out on the bottom. These two objects right now intersect each other. I would like them to become one object, so I can stop selecting them all individually like this. To do that, I can use the Boolean commands. So I have all 4 selected. I can come over here to a Boolean union, means join them together, and they'll become one object. There we go. And now I can work with that object itself. I'm not worried that the glass sheets go through the object. That's perfectly OK. They can go through the object. They'll still appear correct in the overall final rendering. Let me go ahead and delete that object. I don't need it. It's time to start cleaning things up just a little bit. Let's turn off the lines so that they're not there anymore. And let's go ahead and rotate this 3D so it stands up in its view. So I'll take everything. I'll go up to my transform. I'll go to rotate 3D. So there was my axis of rotation. There's my reference, and I want it to go straight up. I'll hold down Shift because ortho isn't on, and now that's standing up like this. I can move it back just a little bit. Let me go to Move. Let's put that point right there at 0, 0, 0. You would want one corner of your window to be exactly the corner of something that you punch through a wall. So the idea here is that once I've made this shape, I can then start to look at this as a block that I could use over and over again. So I have this window. It's ready to be used over and over again. It's easy for me to bring it into a new scene and do a rendering, or to use it multiple times in a rendering. So let's clarify this block just a little bit more. I have something called window. Let me rename it to be 30 by 30 casement window, for example. And underneath that, I might do some sub-layers. So this is a W3030-glass. New sublayer W30. Actually, let me change it to say frame dash W3030. Just lets me see frame there. Glass. So I can take the sheets of glass and put them on the glass layer. Change object layer. There we go. I could take the frame and the mullions, and I could put them on the frame layer. I could have another layer for jam. And again, this is all about organization. So there's the jam. We can put that on this layer. So I've organized that a bit. Maybe I want to show this as a window being partially open. I could rotate 3D, and I could rotate around this particular axis. Oops. There. And there, for example. And I could say I would like this to be open by 30 degrees. Oops, wrong direction. One more time. I put in negative 30. It should have been positive 30. And then that window would be open. So I've got flexibility in what I want to do with this overall. Looks like there was a little piece left here that needs to go away. All right, that's looking pretty reasonable. It's now time to start thinking about materials on this particular window. So if this were, and maybe trim on the window, that wouldn't be a bad thing to do either. So let me do a sublayer for trim. I'm calling it EX trim for exterior trim. And so let's go ahead and add a bit of trim. So in this case, I'll just start here on this corner, and I'll make this trim too big, and I'll make some adjustments for it. I could do a at, and this would be comma negative 1.5, so that it would be the 1.5 inch in thickness. This would be 5.5 tall. If you want to do it just a full 6 inches, that's fine too. It's habit for me to do it a little bit differently. Even though this isn't quite in its perfect position yet, I'm going to use the scale 1Ds to make corrections afterward. Let me move it vertically, and for the niceness, I'm going to add just a little bit of a reveal on that frame there around the window. Make a couple more here. So this here should really go over by, let me turn on ortho. There we go, 0.25. There. I could take this piece, I could copy it in place. So edit, or excuse me, transform, copy. My option is in place. It gives me a second version of it. I could then rotate 3D. and I could rotate this to go down to form that piece of trim, and I can move it over to where it lines up there. Again, there's no right and wrong way that I'm creating this. I'm making it up as I go. Maybe I'll take this one and I'll mirror it across the window. So I'm intermixing lots of different commands because there's different ways of doing it. I want this window head trim to get a little bit longer, so I can use scale 1D. I'll go back to transform, scale 1D. We'll go from this side. Sorry, let's go from right here to right there, and we'll make it that long. Then we'll go back from this side to right there. And so now that's that large. We still need a little bit down below, and these ended up being a little bit long. So let me go back and do a scale 1D. And we'll shorten those up just a little bit. Now I could do another one of these down below. I could do a little sill on the edge of the window. I mean, there's all kinds of flexibility here. I could go from there to there, and we could say this is negative 1.5 inches. Let me scale 1D. Let's have this stick out. Like that. And then I could take this piece and copy it. V for vertical, so it goes straight down. And I could drop that underneath the window. And again, I'm making this stuff up as I go along to make that little bit of exterior trim around the window. I could also make interior trim around the window if I wanted to. That would probably be a little bit smaller, but you guys get the idea. I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me do interior trim, but you get the general idea. So these objects would all be on the trim layer. Oops. There we go. And I'd make sure that they went on the trim layer. Change object layer. So now I have the window pretty much ready, except I haven't done any of the materials yet. So it's time to bring in the materials and apply those materials. And so this, again, depends on what your preferences are. So I could go into my V-Ray and my options, my material editor, and I need to bring in some materials. So let me start first. I'll right-click on See Materials. I'll say Load Material. I'm going to go to my flash drive, into my resources, V-Ray, V-Ray Materials, and I'm going to start with a white plastic because I think that'll work nice for the window itself. I don't have a white plastic, so let me use the black plastic, but I'll change the color. So again, this is why I showed you things like how do you edit materials, because you can make this change. So all the settings in the plastic are the same, the reflectiveness in the plastic is the same, the texture is the same, but I don't want it to be black plastic, which is right there. I want it to be white. So let's come down here to diffuse color. Let's make that white. And suddenly it's white. Let me rename this to be plastic white for clarity. And then I'll assign this white plastic to the frame layer. So I'll right click and say apply material to layer. And it's going to go on the frame layer. Perfect. And remember, I can preview it. I can go into my rendered mode, and I can take a preview of what it would look like. It doesn't look like much yet. We'll come back to it. Let's load in some trim. I'll again go back to my V-Ray material editor. I'll right-click, and I'll say Load Material. And maybe I want the trim to be wood. So I'll come down to wood. If I can find it, there it is, wood. And I'm going to choose the fur because it's going to have a distinct grain pattern, so I'll have to texture map it. But it isn't necessarily what you're going to choose. I'm doing it, again, for illustration purposes. So there's my fur. I'm going to take this and I'm going to apply it to a layer. And this time it's going to go on the exterior trim layer. And there it is. So I have that applied. Now, by default, it didn't do that bad of a job applying my textures. But I should go through and texture map each of these objects. So I'll take this first one, and remember I'll come over, and this is again review from last class. This is part of why I repeat myself on these things. I will go ahead and come over. I'll go into my properties window, and I'll go to the last one, which is texture mapping. I'll click on it. This most closely resembles a box, so I'll go ahead and apply a box map to it. First corner of base or bounding box, I'll choose a bounding box. World, go ahead and cap it. And now I need to make sure over here in my options that x equals y equals z. Okay, there we go, that's good, except that the texture is going the wrong direction now. I want it going the long direction. So I need to either rotate it in the UVW rotation, or I can show my mapping. Go ahead and show my mapping. There it is. And I can rotate this shape. And again, the gumball seems to work the best here, so I'll turn on my gumball. I'm going to rotate it this green rotation. So we'll rotate it right like that. And that then corrects the grain so it's going in the right direction. I'll go ahead and hide that mapping. And I also need to change the density of this mapping. So let's change the UVW repeat to maybe 2. And that looks about right on all sides. So I'm happy. It looks good. I can take this, and remember I can apply it to the rest of the pieces going in this direction. So I could say this piece, I want to match the mapping of that piece. And now those two will have the correct mapping applied. This is going the opposite direction. I can still match the mapping to this, but that makes the grain of the wood go the wrong direction. So I need to go back and show my mapping, and I need to rotate it so that it's going the correct direction. There it is. And I might rotate it one more that way. There we go. I think that looks a little bit better. Perfect. So I've created that. Texture is the same in scale, but it's going the opposite direction. I have 2 more pieces to match. I have this piece and this piece both to match. So we'll take this piece, match mapping to that one. We'll take this one and match mapping to that one. So now I have the texture mapping set on all of those pieces. I have my white plastic set here. The frame or the jamb of the window probably needs to be white plastic too. Let me go back to my V-Ray material editor, and we'll apply the white plastic to the jamb. There it is. And last one would be glass. So I'm going to right click, and this time I'm actually going to use real basic glass. So I'm going to go in and load material. I'll go into V-Ray materials, I'll go to glass, and I'm going to just choose basic glass. And there it is. The basic glass needs to apply to the glass layer. So let me apply the material to layer, and we'll choose the glass. And there we go. And you can see a little bit of a preview there. So I've taken my time, and let me hide my mapping widgets. Somewhere one of these is, there it is. So I've taken my time, I've applied my materials correctly, I've gotten this window to look the way that I want it to look. I'm going to go ahead and save this. There's one other thing. I should get rid of this lines layer for cleanliness purposes. We'll get rid of that lines layer. I don't need it anymore. You can delete those. Then I'm going to save this. I'll go to File and then Save. And I have a separate folder on my flash drive in my resources folder called Rhino Blocks. And I tend to put things like windows in this particular file so that I can reuse them. You can choose to set it up that way, or you could save it in your own folder. This is an Anderson 3030 casement. And I'll go ahead and click Save. So I have that saved. Now it would be nice to do a test and see how this looks rendered. I've given you guys on the course website for today, if you go to exercises and you go to today's exercise, sorry, wrong class. Right here, exercise 208, base file for test rendering. That file, which we'll download right now, has an environment set up for you. It already has a sun. It already has the settings correct in V-Ray, so the rendering will render out correctly. Once that's downloaded, go ahead and open it up in Rhino. And just as you've done with your other blocks, what you did last class, you're going to bring that window in as a block. There isn't a wall or anything to put it in, but it'll still let it render. So here's the scene. You can already see that there's a light and an infinite plane installed, so it's ready to do the rendering. I'm going to go to Edit, and then Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And I'm going to go find that window that I just saved. Sorry, it's under Rhino. And there it is. And I'll go ahead and say Open. And we're going to, in this case, it should be linked as a reference. And there it is. We'll drop it in right there. It probably needs to get moved up just a little bit, so I can go to Transform and then Move, Vertical, and we can bring it up so it's above the scene. Now I need to set it up so that I can render it. So maybe it's about like that. We'll test it out. And I'll go ahead and do a render of it. Let me go to Standard, and I'll click on the Render button here, and we'll take a look. So not bad. It's rendering out pretty well. The textures look like they're turning out pretty well. The sun, the shadow, all of that looks pretty good. It's with the window being open the way it is, we're not getting good shadows through the window. So for the final render, I may rotate this. And this is just a regular rotate. Turn on my object snap here by 90 and render it here. If you were to render it where you saw the horizon behind, you would see just a blue sky behind it. So I just wanted to point that out. It's not a black or a white. So I'm going to do it at about that angle there. I think that'll look good, and we'll render it again. OK, so I'll let that finish rendering. I am going to save this as the sample image file that represents what I did. But when I go to post it, I'm going to post a lot more things. And you'll see this if you go to the course website. If you go into Resources, there's something called a Rhino Blocks library. There are a variety of things that people have done in the past that you can go through and you can download and use. So here's a bunch of windows, for example. There are other things like pillows and whatever hidden in here. There is some separations of some of this stuff. There are even some landscape things that I created for you guys, grasses and rocks and that sort of thing, so you can use those as well. But be aware that they're all there, and you're more than welcome to use and download them. But in order for somebody to actually be able to use them, they need more than just the window file. So we need the preview, but then we also need the Rhino file, and we need the materials. So in this case, this one doesn't have the materials. So we need to make sure that we get all of that put together. So to get the materials, I'm going to go back there. I'll come back to this one. I'll go ahead and save this as my sample. Let's go into today's folder. This was an Anderson 3030 casement. And I will call this the Anderson 3030 sample render. And I'll go ahead and save that. Then I'm going to go back to not the scene. Thank you for that. Not the scene, but the one where I created the original. This is the one that I'm going to save there. So I'll go to File, Save As, and I want to make sure it goes into that folder that I just created. We'll save it here. There's my 3030. Perfect. Now I need to make sure that the materials are also there. So I'm going to go to V-Ray and I'm going to go to Material Editor. And for every one of the materials that I use, I'm going to right-click on the material and I'm going to say Pack Material. This will go and get all the relevant material files that you need to be able to reuse the material. And so the advantage here is that if one of you down the road decided to use my window and you didn't have the fur wood grain texture, you'd either have to go find it or recreate it yourself. If you're going to use it and I give you the texture, all the better. So I'm going to pack that material to use. So basic glass, we'll go ahead and pack the material and I'll put it in the same folder. There's basic glass. It's making a zip file for me. The plastic, the white plastic, I will pack that material and we'll put it in the same place. And the vertical grain fur, I will pack that material as well. And I'll go ahead and click Save. And so ultimately what I end up with is a folder that has the Rhino file that I can use as a block, the sample render that I just created that has the visual of what it looks like, and the 3 materials that are included in this. This whole thing is what you need to actually be able to use this particular block. So I can upload it 2 ways. I can upload all of these individually, or I could also create a zip file of this whole folder. So I could right-click and say send to compressed zip folder, and that'll zip the whole folder. And I can upload that to the course website. Then there's just one thing for people to download. So again, it's kind of up to you as to how you want to do it. Now when you do the post, so let me go in here and I'm going to do a new post. I want to be descriptive in the title. So this is an Anderson 30 by 30 window. Let's call it casement window. I'll scroll down over here. My featured image should be the one of the rendering. So let me upload. Like I said, I'm the administrator, so frequently it takes a while for everything to load because I see everybody's stuff. There's my window. We'll set that as the featured image. There it is. Now I'm going to scroll up here, and you'll see a category for Rhino blocks. It's not the V-Ray material. We're not concerned with the materials at all, but there's something called Rhino blocks. This is where it starts to be useful. So I have an Anderson window, and under fenestration, there we go. This is a window, and it's a casement window. So I'm trying to categorize this as best I can so that somebody could find it if they were searching for it. Then I'll continue scrolling up here. I still need to categorize it as exercise 208. There it is as exercise 208. And last, I need to actually insert the information. So we could download Anderson 30 by 30 casement window, and I can do a little bullet point and say download file here. And I can go ahead and add my media, and I can go find that zip file. Alternatively, you could upload each of these individually, so you could do the Rhino file plus these 3 materials and have a list of these are the things you need. For me, it's a whole lot easier to upload one zip file and have everything in it. But again, that's a personal preference. I need this link, so I'll copy the link. You could also just say insert into post, and it'll put it there, and then you don't have to copy the link. So there it is. As its link, I'll go ahead and publish this. And now that window is available. We can view it when it's done here. There it is. And ultimately, you'd be able to come and download that zip file and you could use it. And that's the whole point of doing these kinds of things. So as just an example of how this would go through, you can have a lot of flexibility. You don't have to do wood trim around your window. You don't have to make it look the same way that I made it look. You could do a door. You could do a window. The one other thing that I should mention is some of the windows, sometimes people like to do a little bit of extra fluting on a window. We did these kinds of chamfers and stuff before. So if, for example, I wanted to chamfer the corner here, chamfer SRF, distances, let's do 1/8 of an inch. There to there. And we could build those little bevels on the sides. I think I made it too big, and I should have done it before I did the Boolean join. But that gives you can do those kinds of things. If you wanted a different profile, you wanted it to have a curve to it or an arc to it. Actually, I'll do the interior trim right now on the window, and I'll show you it that way. Okay, so let's say that I wanted some interior trim. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to draw a polyline around the outside of this window, and I'll close it. There we go. Let me go to offset curve, or excuse me, it's just regular offset. I want to make sure it's going in the correct direction. There it is. I want my distance of my trim. If it's standard trim, it's 2 3/8. Not that you would necessarily know that. There's my 2 3/8. And I want it to go to the outside, although actually I have to offset it toward the inside first. Sorry. Because I want a little bit of a reveal there. Then I will offset that curve by 2 3/8. So my distance was 2 3/8. You could do a round number. I just happen to know that most trim is 2 3/8. 3/8. There it is. And so now I have two curves. I need to identify what the profile is between these two curves. So in this case, let's say I'm going to draw that curve right there, and I'm going to work with that curve. Let me turn off my gumball so it stops getting in the way. And working with this flat is probably a lot easier. For me personally, I would change the C-plane, but we haven't gotten to that just yet. So let me move this temporarily down to 0. I moved it right down there to 0, 2 feet, 0, so that I can work with this. Let me do a rotate 3D of this object so that it's flat. And there it is. So I need to draw what the profile of the trim needs to be here. And so I could start by just using a polyline and say, okay, this trim is going to be a 1/2 inch thick here, which is probably a little bit thick, but we'll do it. We'll go over by a 1/2 inch, like that. Then we want to go down by 1/8. Why is that so tiny? No, it should be just 1/8 inch. There we go. We want to come over, and we'll do it at like, and I could even do an at. Well, we'll leave it like that. Let's go to right there, and let's come down. I want to replace this interior with some curves. So let me do an arc, or maybe better yet, a curve. Something like that. Getting the arcs to look the way you want is always a little bit challenging. I'll turn on my edit points. We'll work through this kind of stuff a lot more next class because we'll be creating organic shapes. But let's say that I want that to come up, and I want this to come over. Like that. And I want that to go there. Let me explode that so I can get rid of some of these segments. I'm going to fill it with a radius of 0, which is my trick for making those corners join up. Come on. Now, of course, it doesn't want to. Let me try to trim it. Okay, so this might not be the most attractive, but it's going to be something that'll you'll be able to work with. So let me join that together. Essentially, that's my cross-sectional curve that I just created the profile of the trim. I can then move it back up to the edge right there. We need to do some rotations to get it back in alignment. So I'll do a rotate, just a regular rotate first, so that it comes around that way. Then, oops, it would help if I did it correctly. There we go. Now I need to do a rotate 3D. And go down until I meet that corner. So I then created the profile, and this all looks an awful lot like a sweep, doesn't it? Where I've created the cross-sectional curve. So I'll go up to surface and I'll do a sweep 1 rail. There's my rail. There's my cross-sectional curve, which of course it's not letting me pick. There it is. I'll hit enter, 1 more enter, and it then built out, let me show it in shaded mode, the trim that would go around the inside. So I can do any kind of a custom shape that I want. It's just a matter of building the profile and following a sweep. So again, a little bit more complicated. I would need here to add a new layer. We'll call this interior trim. That should be a sublayer, and that should all go on the interior trim. And it would need a material assigned to it as well. So you guys get the idea here. I'd go back through, apply material to layer, and this would be the, doesn't it look great? No. Interior trim. There it is. And then I need to save it. File, save. And we can go back over to this file, edit, blocks, block manager. And once that one's saved, I would have to update this one. And it would come in. So you guys get the idea. Okay? So I know that was kind of going off on a tangent, but I wanted to at least show you how you would do that. So if you're feeling really confident in Rhino and you're liking how easy this is coming together, go ahead and try to do some with your sweeps too to enhance this. If you don't feel comfortable and you just want to build something basic, that's okay too. It's just this is a good first chance for you to think through, how do I model this by myself? So I'm not giving you a set of steps to follow. How would I go about doing this? And so hopefully that'll help you guys start getting forward. Next class, we're gonna take our time and build like pillows and that sort of thing. It'll be a little bit scripted, but the shapes that you create won't be scripted. So I'll show you that next class. If there's not any questions for everybody, I'll go ahead and let you start working, and then we'll come back. Make sure on that post that you tag it correctly and that you upload all of the required files, so the materials and your Rhino file, and then we'll go from there. Thanks.